The Pokemon anime is full of iconic battles, emotional moments, and epic victories. But it's also filled with head-scratching decisions, bizarre plot twists, infuriating moments, nonsensical turn of events, and battles that seem designed to make Ash fail in the most ridiculous ways possible. In this video, we'll explore the latter part of the equation. 10 of the most rage-inducing moments that made absolutely no sense and left fans shocked, disappointed, and wondering how on earth some of these battles and instances even made it into the show to begin with. Whether you're a longtime fan who's grown up with Ash, Pikachu, and the gang, or a newer viewer who's been baffled by some of the more recent episodes, there's something here for everyone. From Ash's puzzling battle strategies to Pokemon League heartbreaks and moments where logic was thrown out the window, we're going to cover it all. So sit back, maybe grab something you can punch for anger release, and prepare to relive some of the most frustrating moments in Pokemon history. And hey, if you've ever found yourself yelling at the TV during one of these moments, you're definitely not alone. Let's get started. This battle was the first in a long line of what nonsense can we cook up to make sure that Ash loses at the Pokemon League. This battle started the dreaded and hated tradition of Ash never being able to win a Pokemon League. Worse yet, it started the tradition of having him lose in the most awful ways imaginable that not only rarely made sense, but they were also extremely infuriating. It's not surprising then that most of them made their way into this video. Ash vs Ritchie is not the worst of these battles, but it's still pretty bad. First, the preceding events made sure to handicap both trainers by limiting which Pokemon they could use. This was obviously a way to more easily pave the path to Ash's eventual defeat. After all, the less Pokemon he could use, the less BS they needed to throw into the battle to orchestrate his downfall. Second, his Squirtle is put to sleep with sleep powder, and for whatever reason, this equals being defeated. Despite the fact that in the games, even all the way back in Generation 1, a sleeping Pokemon is still very much in the battle until they are actually knocked out. Heck, the anime itself would adopt this eventually, but not here. Third, while Pikachu was exhausted and he wasn't the powerhouse he is today, I still feel like he should have been able to defeat Sinnoh. Or at the very least, he should have been able to put up a better fight. Having him be worn out was of course just an excuse to justify this. Finally, Ash ultimately loses because Charizard refuses to battle after quote-unquote defeating Sinnoh, who was just withdrawn. Again, playing fast and loose with the rules. Basically anything was used in this battle as an excuse to take a Pokemon out of the fight. Speaking of, Charizard refusing to battle should not have equaled forfeiting. In the games, even if a Pokemon refuses to follow your commands, the battle continues until they are out for good. This battle should have continued until Sparky annoyed Charizard enough that he decided to char him. But of course, this would have gone against the intent of this battle, to deny Ash a win. From the get-go, everything was set in place to engineer his defeat. Limiting which Pokemon he could use ensured that he would have no choice but to use Charizard, giving them a free but nonsensical way to prematurely end his first league run, setting a bad example that would unfortunately be emulated in the future and leaving us both angry and frustrated in the process. Though to be fair, did he really need to use Charizard? Surely he knew what would happen, yet he chose to use him in such an important battle. It makes no sense. Also, couldn't he and Ritchie just have explained what happened and maybe they would have been allowed to heal their Pokemon? Or maybe, I don't know, called Professor Oak to get some Pokemon sent to them? Like there were ways to avoid this being such a disaster of a battle due to having limited options. Though even if Ash had used something else, I'm sure they would have found a way to still sabotage him. They simply refused to let him end his first league run with dignity or with a bang. This is one I have personally always absolutely hated. In fact, every time I have rewatched this battle, I skip this part because I simply cannot stand to watch it. Now yes, I am a bit biased here since Charizard is my favorite Pokemon, and Ash's Charizard is partly to blame for this, which makes him one of my favorites of Ash's Pokemon. So seeing him get totally disrespected like this bothered me greatly, to say the least. How could the very same Charizard that just a few episodes earlier in the same arc defeated a legendary Pokemon fall to a measly Dusclops? It makes zero sense, especially since starting precisely in Generation 3, Fire-type Pokemon were made immune to getting burned, so Will-O-Wisp should have been completely useless against Charizard. Sure, Confuse Ray and Mean Look were still a problem, but nothing Charizard can't handle. The final nail in the coffin, both for Charizard and for this battle, is the fact that Ash had the audacity to have Charizard use a fighting type move against a ghost type. An awful, terrible rookie mistake that just adds to the nonsensical nature of this battle. I'm almost 100% sure that they realized that if they had Charizard battle to his fullest potential, he would have trivialized this battle, especially since Brandon used an Ice-type legendary Pokemon. You know, like the Articuno Charizard defeated. This would have taken away from Bulbasaur and the Squirtle's time to shine. They needed the time in the spotlight more since Charizard already had his moment in this arc and Pikachu had to be the one to defeat Regice, leading Ash to victory. So they had no choice but to give Charizard the short end of the stick in the worst way possible. Something that I have always resented them for. It will forever be one of the worst moments in the anime for me. Like if you were going to take Charizard out, at least have the decency to have him tie with Registeel or Regirock or something, for crying out loud. The fact that Charizard came back with a new move, Steel Wing, and that they provided several flashbacks of everything he and Ash had been through together to serve as fuel for Charizard to do his best, only to still have him lose like this, feels like a slap to the face. Call me a Charizard fanboy all you want, but this, how they massacred my boy, hurts to see. Remember the tradition I spoke about of having Ash lose at Pokemon Leagues in the most awful ways imaginable that not only rarely made sense but that were also extremely infuriating? Well, here we have another noteworthy example of it. Now, unlike the other ones featured on this list, this one is not here because it was a bad battle where Ash battled in a terrible way. It was honestly quite a pretty nice battle overall, and I think Ash did decently well. What lands this battle here is the combination of two things. First, Tobias was obviously created with the sole purpose of being the one who would defeat Ash at the end of the league. After all, with all his rivals, including his main one Paul, out of the competition, there was no one else that could realistically defeat Ash. So they had to come up with someone that could. However, they went too far. Having him face a trainer that has a mythical and a legendary Pokemon was just too much. Like he didn't have a chance from the very start, which is simply unfair. They really wanted him to lose. Second, the Pokemon Ash chose to use for this battle were just awful. Like nothing against Torkoal, Swellow, or Gibble. But knowing that you're going to be up against a mythical Pokemon, why in the world would you choose those 3 to be part of your team? The other 3 make perfect sense. Pikachu and Sceptile are 2 of his strongest Pokemon, and Heracross is not only up there as one of his strongest, but it also has a double type advantage over Darkrai. It would have made more sense if Ash had used, say, Infernape, Charizard, and Snorlax instead of Torkoal, Swellow, or Gible. Not only are these 3 a lot stronger, like they are up there among Ash's strongest Pokemon, but Infernape even has a type advantage over Darkrai, and he proved himself in the battle just before this one. I get that maybe they wanted to let some other Pokemon have the spotlight considering that Ash was using his entire arsenal of Pokemon, but come on. We're talking about the semi-finals here, and he's going up against a trainer with a mythical Pokemon that had never lost to any other trainer in the region. You're seriously telling me that Ash wouldn't look at that and be like, oh no, I have to bring my 6 best Pokemon if I want to have even a sliver of a chance to win. Instead of that, they had him make some questionable selections, which is ultimately part of the reason why he lost. Not only would it have made more sense if he had brought his 6 best to the table, but this would have made the battle even more amazing. And even if he ended up still losing, it would have been a closer battle that left us feeling a lot more satisfied and prouder of Ash. So yeah, overall this battle is not bad. It did not make me that angry. Certainly not to the level of some of the other ones on this list. But this does not change the fact that there are some facts about it that make no sense. The Black and White series could honestly fill an entire video like this one all on its own, since it has infuriating, nonsensical moments by the dozens. For variety's sake, I decided to limit entries from this series to just 4. And what better one to start with than with the first one. The one that began this series with a clear proclamation that best wishes were not going to be in store for us. Pikachu losing to Snivy is simply inexcusable, especially losing so badly. Like, who in the world thought that this would in any way be okay or acceptable? How the heck do you have the very same Pikachu that just a few episodes earlier ended the Sinnoh League with a draw against a freaking legendary Pokemon, lose to a Pokemon that was just picked as a starter Pokemon, and by a new trainer no less? Like, this is inconceivable, unthinkable. There is no way to justify this. Yeah, Pikachu was unable to use electric type moves because of Zekrom. But electric type moves are not what you want to use against a grass type anyways. Plus, against a level 5 Snivy, Quick Attack and Iron Tail should have been more than enough. This battle was just a disgrace, an embarrassment to both Pikachu and to Ash. It is undeniably one of the worst parts of the worst series in this anime. Especially since, unlike the previous ones, I cannot come up with a reason why this was done. Next for this god-awful series, we have yet another battle where Pikachu was disrespected. This time the opponent and its trainer were stronger and more experienced, somewhat alleviating the sting of this defeat, of this affront. However, at the same time, this time he had the type advantage and was not affected by Zekrom, meaning he could use electric type moves, and he was still the same Pikachu that battled a Latios to a draw just a few episodes prior. So while I wouldn't say this was worse than the Snivy abomination, it was still quite awful. There is absolutely no reason why this late in the game, after everything he had gone through, after everything he had done, including knocking out 2 legendary Pokemon, Pikachu should be losing battles like this. Battles that should be a cakewalk for him. It's especially aggravating in this case because Tepig and Oshawott, who are far less powerful and experienced, and Oshawott was even at a type disadvantage, Wonder battles, which is ultimately why Ash still got the badge. I get not having Ash win all 3 battles, but if you're going to have someone take an L, it shouldn't be Pikachu. Certainly not in this case. Also, yes, you could argue that Cress and Panpour are stronger than their siblings, and that their fighting style, clever and strategic, is a perfect foil to Ash and Pikachu. But even so, this should not be the result. And I don't even care that Panpour used a ground type move. The Black and White series definitely has just the worst version of Ash ever. From losing battles in inexplicable ways, as you have seen and will see in the next entry, to making some horrible decisions, it's clear that for this series, they had something against Ash. Like they downgraded him hard, especially considering how great he ended up being in Sinnoh by the end. 5 generations in, you would think that he would know better than to underestimate a gym leader. And yet, when it was time to face Elesa, he immediately thought, 3 Pokemon? Nah, I just need 1 Pokemon to defeat her because I have the type advantage and immunity on top of that. Nothing can possibly go wrong. This will be a cakewalk. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't a cakewalk. After having his master plan backfire spectacularly, he was forced to leave the gym in the middle of the battle, no less, to get some more Pokemon because he didn't just expect that he could win with 1 Pokemon, which is bad enough. He was actually banking on it so hard that he only brought the 1 Pokemon to the battle. Like, seriously, Ash? How foolish can you possibly be? This was not only disrespectful to Elesa, but it made Ash look really bad. Not to mention childish and like a complete amateur. Now look, compared to most of the other entries on this list, and compared to the other examples from the Black and White series, this is honestly not that bad. But it's still definitely facepalm inducing and just plain infuriating. Last but certainly not least for the worst series, we have what is in my opinion the most infamous and worst example of the lengths they were willing to go to have Ash lose at a Pokemon League. First, Cameron thought that a full battle meant 5-on-5, so he was at a clear disadvantage from the start, yet he still won, adding insult to injury. Second, the choices Ash made for and in this battle were questionable. He lets 2 Pokemon fall to Hydreigon before bringing out Pignite, who has the type advantage over it and is also one of Ash's best Unova Pokemon. Speaking of, Boldore and Oshawott, Ash? Really? Why not use Crocodile and Leavanny instead? Once Hydreigon is out, Cameron sends out Samurott and Ash keeps using Pignite instead of switching to Pikachu right away. Basically, he gives Cameron a free knockout. Speaking of, Cameron sends out Swanna to battle Pikachu and Ferrothorn to battle Pignite. Like, seriously? 2 free knockouts to make Ash look less bad. However, the worst part of the battle by far is near the end. Cameron's final Pokemon is Riolu, who defeats Unpheasant, even though it's a baby Pokemon with a base stat total of 285, and Unpheasant is a fully evolved Pokemon with a base stat total of 478. More baffling still, Unpheasant has the type advantage on top of this. Riolu then defeats Snivy as well, which is not as unbelievable as defeating Unpheasant, but it's still bad. Not only because stat-wise, even Snivy, an unevolved Pokemon, is still stronger than Riolu, but also because Riolu ends up defeating 2 Pokemon in a row. Now yes, it evolves in order to defeat Snivy, but this just adds to the nonsensical nature of the fight. Riolu, a Pokemon that evolves with high friendship, evolves when it's against the ropes in a tough fight. This is BS. Clearly just an excuse to let it defeat Snivy, and worse yet, defeat Pikachu too. Like, they just hated Pikachu in this series, maybe even more than they hated Ash himself. So Cameron defeats all 6 of Ash's Pokemon with just 3 of his. I think this is honestly the worst battle in the anime, period. At least from the ones meant to be serious battles. It's a complete and total crapstorm. Ash was absolutely disrespected here, clearly showcasing just how far the writers were willing to go to deny him a win at a Pokemon League. Speaking of awful trends/traditions in this anime, here we have a prime example of another one. Ash simply could not own super powerful Pokemon. For example, they prevented him from ending up with both a Gengar and a Tyranitar back in the original series, and they did not let him catch Solgaleo, and he released Naganadel. Plus, his Gible never evolved. Even when they finally allowed him to catch Pokemon like these in the XY series, they made sure to engineer ways to make sure that he couldn't keep them. He finally got to have a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, but not for long, something that could also be included in this list. However, him releasing Greninja as well is what takes the cake for me here. Like, why? Just why? Literally one of the most beloved Pokemon, not just from the ones belonging to Ash, but also overall and from this generation. A Pokemon that greatly elevated this series, that was consistently one of the best parts of it, that led to some of the best moments in it, heck, some of the best moments in the entire anime, a supremely cool Pokemon with a unique power that never failed to thrill us. Why in the world did you make Ash release it? This was just a huge middle finger to both Ash and us, the fans. A massive mistake that forever tarnished one of the best series in this historic anime. Clearly they deemed Ash Greninja to be way too powerful for Ash to keep. Hence why they had to get rid of it, to the point that even when Greninja returned in Journeys, its unique form had been deleted from existence. If you were going to pretend like Ash Greninja never existed anyways, then why make Ash release it? Or is this something they came up with after the mistake was made, to further bury Greninja and its legacy? In any case, the way they treated Greninja is just infuriating and plain disrespectful. Moreover, you seriously expect us to accept that a freaking legendary Pokemon needs Greninja's help to do its job? Plus, Ash was just going to go back to Kanto to leave Greninja at Oak's lab before traveling to Alola with just Pikachu anyways, so Greninja being overpowered wouldn't have had an impact on the story going forward, making the decision to get rid of it even more perplexing. This is still Ash's worst release of a Pokemon to this day. Imagine being the protagonist for over 1,000 episodes, over 20 years, 8 generations, and 20 plus movies, and never getting to officially catch a legendary Pokemon. However, some new guy shows up and within 53 episodes, he catches one. I'm sure this would be rage-inducing. It certainly was for us when we were forced to see Go stumble his way into catching Suicune. It makes absolutely no sense that Go was allowed to catch a legendary Pokemon so early in his journey, especially catching it this easily. Like, he befriended Suicune, sure, but within one episode and he just threw a normal Pokeball at it. No battling, no skill, no special tactics, no nothing. He was just gifted a legendary Pokemon for no reason. This was just a complete and total disregard of logic and common sense. I cannot fathom why they thought this would be even remotely acceptable. Yeah, Ash can't catch Solgaleo after they spent several episodes together and bonded and did more than Go and Suicune ever could. But Go, he can catch Suicune in the same episode they met. Why not, right? Makes perfect sense. Like what? What? Who thought this would be okay? This honestly decreased the value of legendary Pokemon, and it is yet another way in which they blatantly disrespected Ash, his legacy, and his history. To make matters worse, Journeys ended with Ash still having no legendary Pokemon even though Lugia showed up and he bonded with Latias and Latios, while Go ended up with another legendary Pokemon for a grand total of 2. 2 more than Ash. Now before anyone brings it up because they have in the past, Naganadel and Melmetal are not legendary Pokemon. And like I said, Solgaleo was not officially owned by Ash since he never actually captured it. Meaning everything I said still stands. I have no further words to express my supreme disappointment and frustration, so let's just move on, okay? To wrap up our tumultuous journey through some of the worst moments in this anime, we have several instances where Ash forgets how type matchups work, even though he shouldn't be making such a rookie mistake, especially not repeatedly and after battling so much. I won't go into too much detail beyond providing several examples since it's self-explanatory that this is, well, dumb. Like, how can someone that is aiming to be a Pokémon Master constantly forget one of the fundamental basic elements of Pokémon battling? I already discussed one example when I went over how he had Charizard use a fighting type move on a ghost type. Other key examples include having Pikachu use an electric type move against a ground type Pokémon, which he has done several times, so much so in fact that even Pikachu makes this mistake, having Dracovish use a dragon type move against a fairy type, and having Naganadel use a poison type move against a steel type. There are obviously several more examples, but I'm not going to list them all. I'm sure you get the picture. I don't know if Ash just never learns, or if he has bad memory, or if the writers just use such lapses in judgment to spice up battles. But regardless of the reason, we can all agree that Ash forgetting how types work never fails to be infuriating and nonsensical. Though hilariously, we already saw what happens when he doesn't forget how type matchups work. So basically, regardless of what he does, Ash always finds a way to embarrass himself. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that the writers always find ways to embarrass him. And there you have it. 10 of the most infuriating and nonsensical moments in the Pokemon anime, which left us questioning logic, screaming at our screens, cursing Ash and/or the writers, and force palming our faces. There are of course more moments like these, which I would love to cover in a sequel to this video if it does well. Please be sure to let me know your thoughts on these moments, and do share some others that I did not include. If I do make a follow-up video, I could include them in it, and I would feature your comment, with your permission of course, to give you credit for your contribution. And in case you're wondering where this video came from, since it kind of came out of nowhere, this is an idea I've had for a while, but I never got around to making it. Mostly because I've been caught up just covering Horizons. So why did I suddenly decide to make it? Well, I figured that it was time to sprinkle in some variety. But that's the video. Make sure to click the links on screen to see more videos like this one, and to subscribe for more Pokemon videos. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.